Good morning and welcome to Dr. V's Coaching Corner. I'm your host, Allen Wazny, and joining me in the podcast studio is Dr. 𝚂𝚎𝚘𝚗𝚏𝚖, also known as Dr. V. Good
Hello,
morning.
Alan. How are you this morning?
Terrific. So for the listeners out there, this is episode 1 of Dr. V's Creative Coaching or Coaching Corner. Creative Coaching, it could be that as well.
Yeah,
But I
you
had
can
the,
that too.
but I did have the pleasure of learning about your own personal journey back on episode 378 of the Calgary Business. So, I mean, I guess your journey to the Coaching Corner. So it was episode 378 of the Calgary Business Podcast. So I wanted to let, our two listeners out there know that.
Oh, I think we have more than 2 listeners. But yes, we are in the coaching corner. As you know, I am a coach. I do different things. I'm a mindset coach, and I am also work with a little bit of energetics and work with business owners.
Yeah.
And I thought that just having the coaching corner will be a good opportunity to just have a taste in some of the topics I work on. Like
But
if
I
you
don't
were
think you,
sitting
I,
here with
I just
me.
don't think you sit in the corner. I think you're standing on the bench and you're letting people know this is how to be. Because our topic today is really about that, right? Coming out of the corner
Yes.
and getting on the bench
Coming
and
out of the
being,
corner and getting into the stage. That's what we want.
okay. So that leads us to the topic. It's self-confidence. And I guess we've got a lot to deep into to delve into on this one. It's not just self-confidence. There's some subparts to this as well.
Yes, self-confidence. I decided on just starting with this topic mostly because I have a lot of clients and people that come to me and just ask me questions about this, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how can I be more self-confident? It's probably one of the most popular searches on YouTube. How to gain self-confidence, how to boost self-confidence, how to be more self-confident.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, more self-confident.
Yeah.
And see, that's what we were talking last time about. Sometimes I make a mistake and then just after
But
the
you
fact,
picked it up. See, it's hard.
I picked it up. Yes.
And
So
that's
see, I'm getting better.
that's
And
a tribute. That's a
that's
tribute
also
to your,
part of
you've coming from with how many languages you speak? You probably speak 4 or 5 languages,
three,
right?
three.
3. Okay. So but we're conversing in English, but you probably have some thoughts of the word and then immediately correct yourself when you realize, wait, that's not how it's said. So I like
Yes,
that.
and that was part of self-confidence too, because before it was like, oh my God, I made a mistake, right? And you're like, you feel less, and you remember about those chips that we were talking about last week.
Yeah.
Then eventually you start gaining confidence and you say it's just a mistake, right? It's just like correct and move on and just go on with your life. And that is part of also gaining self-confidence, because I don't teach anything that I haven't practiced.
Well, it's like do as I do, not as I say. There's an expression in English, do as I say. It's like literally, no, if you show me how to do it, I'm probably going to be more, if you just tell me what to do, it's hard.
Right.
Like you provide practical examples. So that's what a coach does, right? A coach gives practical
Yes.
examples to its team, his or her team. So I think the analogy works really well in a professional setting because it's one thing for people to tell you, but you actually practice what you preach. You
do.
have a YouTube channel. You actually are a practicing coach. No, but you're a mentor, right? You were a mentee before, now you're a mentor. So you practice what you preach. So
I do.
but that
And
self-confidence, it takes time, right? It does
it
take
takes time and it takes work. I wish I had the magic wand, like now you're going to be more self-confident. That's not the way it would work. It
And I
works.
like that.
You
I
need
heard it's the same as saying, I want to do 100 push-ups. Okay. Talking about doing 100 push-ups, I'm giving that physical thing. But if you don't do the 100, you don't even start with 1, you'll never get to 100. So if you don't practice and so maybe today's self-confidence, but you've talked that there's multiple avenues of this.
Yeah, there's multiple
topic.
seminars. And I would just like to start by saying that I thought about this topic also because I know that a big part of your listeners are entrepreneurs and business owners.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's very important to believe in yourself and to be self-confident when you're an entrepreneur, because you have your own business, because you are your own business.
Yeah.
And when it comes to building a business, your perception of yourself and your abilities affects everything you do.
It's interesting. It's interesting because that self-confidence to go out and say, to leave, if it, depending on when your entrepreneurial journey starts, but it's literally you're leaving the comfort of in a desk working for somebody in a capacity where now you're the individual that you have to know everything. You have to be the master of everything.
Yes.
So if you don't have confidence, how are you going to explain that? Yeah.
Right. And then you can be a very smart business person, but you can still be holding back because there's feelings of unworthiness, right? And that's a recipe for disaster.
That's incredible. I never thought of it as the business owners having the self-confidence, but I think it is almost part and parcel. And I just want to give you, before we start talking about some of your advice, coach advice. I remember going to the Toastmasters. So up at University of Calgary, I went to it because we're business students. We thought we had to learn how to present, right? And that presenting is as a natural part of the business school. But I believe that's that Foothills Toastmaster, the Toastmaster should be virtually everybody, like doing presentations in the science class or doing presentations in an art class. I don't know why it's not more outside of the business. Maybe it is. But in my day, the business people had that kind of the pulpit, right? That pulpit to stand behind and give presentations, and everyone else. I don't know. I just don't. What's your view on that in the
I
schools?
think you're absolutely right. When I was in high school, I took public speaking as an elective, just because I was interested, right? But I remember we were two people in the class, and eventually it was just me because it was an elective, and yeah, like it was. But I think now some programs have it as one of the courses, as the mandatory courses. I think 𝚬𝚐 does it in some other courses.
Okay, so because I mean, like I was up at 𝚬𝚐 for an earlier podcast way back during pre-COVID, and I was talking about that kind of, the automotives department, because when they get out, are they learning about the other business skills like marketing, finance, legal, account, whatever it is, because they might not have a job right to working for a mechanic shop. They might have to go in their own trades. I talk about plumbing, automotives, or whatever. They might have to go and start being an entrepreneur. And so they need, I didn't say they need to, and he talked about that. He said, yeah, we bring in the business students to come in and talk to some of the some of those trades or the not electives, but the other departments. So you're probably right. I think 𝚬𝚐 has more ingrained that, but that public speaking is just confidence.
Well, confidence is more than just public speaking, but it's one of the ways people show confidence, right? Like by public speaking, by just being able to be on a stage, being able to be on a podcast, being able to just give a talk or do a video and post it in YouTube. Like it's not easy, and it's a part of being confident. So you have to work, and we were just talking a little bit that before we started, that how important it is to be in video nowadays. And if you don't feel confident, you're never going to get out there and promote your business and do a video, and right? So it's very important. And without self-confidence in a business, you will not get far. That's what I find that is very important for business owners and entrepreneurs to work on their self-confidence.
To the point of whether the business can use a video, I've heard this, if you're not a good writer, then you speak. If you're not a good speaker, then you video, you do, that. There's several ways to get that message out, but I know some people think they have this, they get up the phone, they got to do video, and they got to be goofy or weird versus being yourself, right? Because I've seen people, and I'm not going to name names, but it's literally I've seen their posts. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not you as a professional. You kind of taken it to a different level. And I'm like, you don't have to be in a costume, you don't have to be dressed up, or just to do a video.
And you've just mentioned a thing that is key for self-confidence, which is be yourself, right? But how can you be yourself if you don't know yourself? But we're going to get into those details in a little bit longer. I just want to mention that, as you and I know, building a business can be a roller coaster.
Yeah.
There's times where you are up, and then other times where you're down. Some days you're riding the crest of the wave, and other days you have so much stress that you cannot even make decisions. So what will happen?
So to that point, though, the ups and downs, but if you have this one thing that's constant, and if it's a video or a blog or a vlog or something that's constant, it'll actually help you get through. You could get away from the ups and downs. If it's too low or too high, you come in, even keel. That's where,
that's when you can use confidence as a weapon, to for these difficult times.
Yeah.
Self-confidence is just key. Right. But the problem is, how do you maintain self-confidence in those days where your business is hitting a rough patch, or when you have a customer that's really causing you problems, or when you're losing a contract to a competitor. Like, how do you keep the self-confidence? So that's what we're going to be talking today.
Okay. So self-confidence. So this is very situational now. So how are we defining that, Dr. V? I just want to make sure I have the episode notes, have that correctly. How do you want to define this? Yeah, today's topic on self-confidence.
I just want to start by saying that there's some difference between self-esteem and self-confidence, because some people just talk about both indistinctly, and it shouldn't be like that. Self-esteem is measured by how much you value yourself, while self-confidence determines how much you believe in yourself.
Okay.
They are correlated. They're totally correlated.
Right.
Self-esteem refers to the way you feel about yourself, how much positive regard or self-esteem you have, right? Like it's developed from experiences and situations that have shaped how we see ourselves.
Right.
That's self-confidence, right? How you feel about yourself. Self-esteem.
Yeah.
Well, self-confidence is the ability to act towards a goal and conquering it by believing in yourself. Is knowing that there are fears to face and throwing yourself anyway.
So okay. This, what you just said there, reminds me of, I've heard this many times, as people talk about the process. So there's going to be ups and downs. But if you're focused on the process, if you have self-confidence that what you're doing is right,
yes,
irregardless of the rejection or
I'm just going to interrupt you there, because I just want to say what you're doing is right for you.
Yes.
Right? Because right or wrong, it can be very subjective.
Yeah. That's actually a good point. That's a good point. So so you feel it's right, but that's it. So believing in yourself, so you're going to conquer that goal. So let's deep dive into that. I didn't want to interrupt that. I just meant that really brought me to that point of the process. You as an individual believe that's the self-confidence. You have the self-confidence that your process that you're following is right. Whether it's, I mean, there's probably many histories, there's probably many parallels in history that when you talk before internet or whatever, we could probably talk about that. It'll come up. But literally, if you believe, so I'm going to read this: act towards a goal to conquer it by believing in yourself. So that's self-confidence.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's another term that I also want to touch on because it's also related.
Yeah.
Is personal power. I was just listening to a psychologist from Harvard, and she had a definition that I really like, where she says that personal power is being in control of our internal resources to bring our skills and abilities forward. That's having personal power, right? She also points out that personal power is not the substitute of skills and knowledge, which I think is a very important point. It's not this fake it until you make it, but it's about revealing what are your skills that you have already and showing them to the world. I will add unapologetically.
Right. Okay.
Right? This also gives you the opportunity to create more skills because it's self-reinforcing, right? So it's this virtuous circle.
That's incredible. Okay, so are we talking about self-esteem versus self-confidence still?
We're talking about self-confidence. I just want to mention all these terms that can be just very related, right? Yeah. Self-confidence is the ability that we have to face challenges that come our way.
Okay.
And it's an attitude that means that you accept yourself and have a sense of control of your life, have this personal power we were talking about.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I was listening to this podcast about this, as I said, this Harvard psychologist, and she was mentioning how after COVID, our self-confidence and our personal power has been affected because we have to we gave control away for so long that now we're recovering this control. We don't know what to do with it, right? It's like, I don't know who I am. I'm probably not the same person that I was before COVID started. Like, all these things that changed in my life could be personal tragedies as losing someone, or could be just losing jobs, or could be just working from home, or could be, different things that are shaping you in a different way, and you are re-emerging without really knowing who you are. And when you don't know who you are, your self-confidence really gets impacted.
Well, to that point, I had on with a doctor, Assured Psychology, we're doing a series, Get All Psyched Up About, and he literally was talking about, so the psychologist the clinical psychologist team, they said they would get phone calls during COVID, what to do. They themselves were in a situation they weren't comfortable. They were in a position like, what do you do? Like literally they were being asked by their clients and their customer and they themselves didn't know what to do. So the psychologist needed the psychologist. That was the situation. And so Dr. David 𝚤𝚙𝚗𝚏, he's not a doctor, but he's a clinical Dave 𝚤𝚙𝚗𝚏 said, he goes, my wife, I happen to have, she's also a psychologist. So we managed to chat. What do you guys do? What should we do? How are you doing the situation? So people that were dealt with on a daily, trained the self-confidence to deal with this, found themselves not knowing what to do.
Right.
So I don't know, do you have a thought on that? Because it was incredible. It literally, COVID impacted virtually everybody. I mean,
it impacted everyone. And I was like, that's what I also wanted to talk about this today, right? To just give some tips and some suggestions on how you can just start building again that personal power and that self-confidence.
Perfect. Okay.
Especially if you have a business, right? So
yeah.
Okay. So as we mentioned, self-confidence, the ability to face challenges, right? And to have a sense of control in your lives. And for that, you need to make an objective and correct assessment of what your abilities and skills are, right? This part of, you have to know yourself. You have to know who you are. You need to know what are your strengths. You need to know what are your weaknesses. To be able to set realistic expectations and goals, right? To communicate assertively, to handle criticism without letting it get under your skin.
Right. So is that like a personal, so in the business side, they talk about SWOT analysis. It sounds like that's part of that, strengths and weaknesses.
That's part of that. Yeah.
Personal SWOT, personal SWA.
This person. Yeah, exactly. This personal, this self-knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Because what happens if you have because low self-confidence can make you feel doubtful, passive, submissive, right? You might have difficulty also trusting others. It can make you feel inferior. It can make you feel unloved. But having this higher low self-confidence is very rarely related to your actual abilities.
Right.
Or skills or talents or gifts, as I like to call them, right? It's mostly based on your perceptions.
Okay, so you perceive that you're weak, or you perceive that you don't have the ability. What do you say to that? I mean, yeah.
Self-awareness is the first step, right? Because perceptions are the way you think about yourself. And these thoughts might not be real. How many people do you know that are very good at something and they just don't believe it? Like you are looking at them and you say like, oh, you draw so well. And they're like, oh, this thing is not as good as I would like it to be because blah just is better at this. Or,
yeah,
just can you, yeah, I'm pretty sure you're thinking of a person right now because I can see it. So we're not going to get into that, but we all know, or we've been there, right? When somebody tells you, oh, you're really good at that. And you're like, really? Do you think so? Because you don't have that perception that you are good at the same thing. So it's very important to just have this self awareness of a realistic assessment of what your strengths and your weaknesses are.
But I look at the reason I had that, I was thinking was more of the people that think they're really good and they're not, and they obviously,
that's another thing too,
where they're just terrible. And people are afraid to, I mean, that obviously if there's a boss or, there's certain situations, obviously people don't admit it, but it's just funny. There's the opposite. And I don't think that if that's a problem or not. And it's like, I just heard that, well, you suck. You're probably not good at what you're doing after 4 years or whatever it is. But yeah.
And you might not be good at something really. But that's also that self-awareness. Shall I continue doing this, right? Because it's just of impacting my self-esteem and impacting my self-confidence. So this is when you have to stop and just analyze this. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Just let me just paint an overview of what is important to have a high self-confidence, right? Self-confidence and self-esteem go also hand in hand. Because if you have low self-esteem, well, when you assess your abilities, your assessment is not going to be objective, right? You most likely are going to underestimate your strengths and your abilities. And self-confidence, as we are seeing, continually feed each other. So imagine that you have low self-esteem, right? And then a challenge just comes up. So the first thing that is going to come to mind is, I will not going to be able to do it. And maybe you don't do it anymore just because of that thought, right? That thought just stops you from actually moving forward.
Yeah.
Or maybe you do it, but you won't do it with the same motivation and enthusiasm as if you believe you could.
Yeah, it's incredible that it's like, I literally go back to, and I'm going to give the business sense. When we were working on a project back in with I was in Qatar and my colleague was in Cayman Islands. And for 6 months, we worked, we built, we had this, and somebody told him in a meeting, no, you need to, you have to change the presentation, the pitch deck. And he went away dejected. And literally the next call, he's like, I don't know, I don't think this is for me. Literally, we had this discussion. I don't think this is for me. And I had to kind of build it back up. Well, look, you had the 6 months of, I literally had to reaffirm. I don't know how this fits into, but it's like, it literally one discussion with someone who was some kind of a figurehead, and it knocked it 6 months worth of work, of solid, good work and the abilities or whatever. So how do literally it can be that one thing, the trigger point, the matchstick or whatever it is, right?
Yes, it's just that thing, right? And then your results are not the best. And what happens is, do you remember the virtual circle we were talking at the beginning? This is a vicious circle, because this is the image you have when this happened. I bet that image, that self-image was also diminished.
Literally,
right?
he wanted to quit. He wanted to quit this down the path of, just because all that good work, because of one seemingly authoritative figure or person who gave that input. It's easy to crumble down. So self-confidence drops,
Right.
self-esteem drops.
People get into your skin. The criticism gets into your skin because you're really not sure. I'm good, but maybe I'm not good. But if somebody tells me that I'm not good, maybe then I'm really not good, right? What do you have? You're very clear on what you're good at. People can tell you're not good at this, and you're like, you know what? I know I am. So this might not have been a successful situation, but I still doesn't make me, I have a lesson to learn. I take this as a learning opportunity, but then I keep on moving on because I know that these are my talents. Of course, there's always a learning curve.
But see,
right?
the person needs an outlet. If he didn't, if I didn't have the outlet, if him and I didn't have the discussion, I'm not going to name names if he didn't have that discussion, it would have gone downhill. When 6 months later, it did end, but for other reasons, not from self-confidence, but just reality was we're not getting funding or whatever. But that point in time, if he didn't have an outlet, and I'll give Reid Hoffman I listened to a podcast. So Reid Hoffman's a co-founder of LinkedIn, PayPal, and he said it during the early days in the 90s, we had this, and my founder gave me the call and he said, I'm quitting. He was going to the airport to go on vacation. He had to stop. But I always remember that. He said, so I had to have that discussion. There was nobody else. If I didn't stop and do what I was doing and not talk to my co-founder, we wouldn't have been, I can't remember the project or whatever, the business they were on. He said, so I'm going back to my case. So if my colleague didn't have that outlet to have me talk to him and rebuild him up, what would you say, Dr. Veronica, Dr. V? What would you say in that circumstance?
What would I say to her, to this person?
Him or her? Yeah, if there's no outlet, if there's only you.
There's no outlet. You have to look for one. You have to look for one, because if you are just getting into this vicious circle of low self-esteem and lack of confidence, you really have to look for some support. And there is many ways, right? There's many ways of finding support, but you really have to do something, because it just gets worse. As you just said, right? It will just end up quitting. Like he was lucky to have you in that moment, because otherwise he could have lost their job. And imagine if that person just loses.
No, it was a project. He had a day job.
It's just this rabbit hole. You just go down, 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 right?
Yeah. No, he had a day job, so he wouldn't have lost a job, but he would have stopped giving up on that project, which is fundamental to things that are happening today. Like those 4 months, the 6 months, they literally carried forward to today. Like the stuff that's happening today for me and for him. Knowing that personally, if it had given up, it might have been different, his view on certain things. So okay, so there's nobody to talk to. I'm isolated. What do you say to someone you're coaching in that, if there's a scenario like that?
Well, we have to sit down and just evaluate the situation, right? Like, what's making this person feel like that? Is this really happening? Because a lot of things are happening in our head, and sometimes we just need to stop and see what is the reality of all this.
Like a little voice. Dr. V, the little voice is in my head. Okay, it's not like I'm not crazy, but people have that little voice telling them the negative, right? That this, you can't do this, or the perception. So yeah, that little voice.
You have to get out of your head. You have to get out of your head, and sometimes you cannot get out of your head without an external input. That's the truth, right? Like it could be, in this case, it was you. It could be a friend. It could be a coach. It could be a psychologist. It could be sometimes just listening to a podcast, right? Like just reading a book, but it has to be some internal input that is just affecting the way you're thinking. It's breaking that cycle.
Yeah. But so that's where I talk about if you act towards a goal to conquer and believe in yourself, I believe that process can help. It might be deflection. It might not be the clinical psychologist, and Danny McMillan might disagree with my thought, but I think if you're focused on that process, that you can delve yourself into something. Again, I'm just, doing another podcast or researching something on that topic to get your mind away from. So if you're a
But
business,
sometimes it's difficult because, the problem is getting out of the circle, right? Like you're in this vicious circle, and how you breaking the cycle is a difficult thing. That's what I'm thinking is needs to be, there might be people who disagree with me, but you need to have some sort, even if you're doing inner work, because all of this is inner work, right? Like all of this is personal work. All of this is personal development.
Yeah.
But to be able to trigger that, you need something external sometimes. Or unless you are, it can be just a something you saw, something you heard, right? Like just sometimes little things that trigger this change or this awareness of, oh, wait a minute, where am I right now?
So it's being in the present, like being present versus being, like that. That's the next topic of our All Psyched Up About, is literally being in the present when in a stressful situation. And maybe, Dr. V, we can reverse back to that, but it's literally when life brings you stressful situations. That's what we're going to talk about under the next podcast. But it's being present, right? So forget about that, the calamity that's happened, but being present. So what would you say? I guess if your client came to you and had all this, how would you get them back to the present?
Oh, we'll have to just talk about what's happening. Just you really have to so you can have a good perspective of things, right? Because otherwise you're living too much in your head. It's amazing how to live in our heads without really I don't want to say being in touch with reality, because everybody has their own reality, but sometimes we stop doing things, or we start doing things because we are too much in our heads.
Yeah.
Right. And then it is just difficult sometimes to get out of our heads. So that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about this today. What can you do to get out of that cycle today? It's not, I wish, when you're asking me, what would you tell them? I wish I could just tell them something and just change things. But it's probably not going to be like that, right? It's going to be a series of steps or activities and practice that you have to do to get out. And then there's going to be days where you're going to go back, and then you have to be out again. All right. Is this 3 steps forward, 1 step back, because it's hard. We've all been there. I'm sure you and I also have, we can just be here chatting about how many experiences we have when we lost self-confidence, when we have something happen, and even though we were feeling very powerful and in control of our own personal power, something just happened and we had to go back. And it was not until that external trigger made something changed, or us getting out of our heads.
It's hard to get out of your head. It's hard to get, note to self, get out of your head. Like literally that, note to self, write this down. And so even there's the positive affirmations, there's chants, and sometimes it's not easy, but it's the power of the mind it is powerful, right? And you've talked about, you've talked about how you feel about yourself. If you don't feel good, it's hard to pull out of that. So I'm going to let you, lead this one, but it's just,
and we'll get into that. Now that you're saying how you feel, it's also, how many people said that you have the thoughts, but sometimes you have the feelings first, and then you start making the thoughts. So you have to really change how you're feeling. and that will change also what you're thinking. But let's just talk a little bit more about this low self-confidence, because I just want to mention that it can be sometimes due to different experiences, growing up in a critical and unsupportive environment, or being separated from your friends and family for the first time, judging yourself too harshly, or being afraid of failure. There's many things that can affect these self-esteem, right? People with low self-confidence often have flaws in their thinking, because it's being in their head when you're not having these thoughts of who you really are, what's happening in reality. Like I mentioned to you last time, that in my personal life, it happened to me when I first moved
from Mexico to
France,
Canada,
then to Canada, right? Like when I arrived there, and it's like your everything just changes. The idea that you have of yourself, your environment, the people you are hanging out with, everything just changes, and that just makes you sometimes not think very clearly. Takes a time to reinvent yourself, takes a time to going out of this vicious circle. And so as I said, they say that we coach and teach what we have outgrown. And I think in my case, it's been a long path for me to get into this place.
I like that. So we coach and teach what we have outgrown.
Mhm.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the quote of the day, because I didn't think of that, but it's like because your life experiences teach you, what you shouldn't do or should do, and people always say, who's your mentor, who's your best, or we're like, it's, I aspire not to be like this person because they did this or that, or, so I literally, those negative or positive, they come together and like, they just hit you, and you're coaching that, you're teaching that, you're literally, but do you catch yourself at some point where you haven't outgrown something, but you still find yourself maybe habit?
Oh yes, all the time. Like I wish I could say, like, there are some people that just say, I'm going to teach you to do this, I'm going to coach you on that because I am perfect and I already outgrown everything. No, of course not. Of course, sometimes there's going to happen something in my life that is going to take me back to, square one, but I can bounce back faster because I have the tools and I have the process and I know how to do it.
So do you have a toolbox? Are you going to show it? You're going to pull out the toolbox?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the toolbox here, actually. But I'm going to just mention some things, and then each one of the next episodes in our series is going to be just diving a little bit deeper into one of these tools.
Yeah. Okay.
So we can have a better understanding, right? Like it's so we can actually apply them, because really believing in yourself is what allows you to rise up and reach your potential. That is, of course, just to your point of before, I want to clarify that when I speak about self-confidence, I'm not talking about our blind arrogance, right? It's not that.
Yeah.
It's not narcissism. It's referring to self-confidence as believing in your strengths, believing in your gifts, in your goals, in your dreams, and most.
You have to ignore your weakness. You have to ignore your weaknesses, because if you think, oh, I'm not really,
you have to know your weaknesses, but you don't have to dwell on that, right? Like you have to know where also your strengths. But you also have to believe in your ability to succeed.
Yeah.
And
on that note, there was something I remember her. I might not phrase it correctly. You have to be more. So your beliefs have to be your to succeed. Your belief to succeed has to be more powerful than your fear of failure. Something around that. So that,
yeah, I like that. Yes.
If you're afraid of failure, that's fine, but you have to want to succeed more. There's something around that.
You still have to move forward, right? You still need you believe in your possibility and your ability to succeed, and that's what is making you move past your fears.
Yeah.
And just do it. Right? They say that a person that's confident is a person who has no fear. No, courage is having no fear. No, courage is being afraid and still doing it. Right? Yeah. Like I like Brené Brown mentions this in one of her books, that is like, well, you shouldn't go to that point. We have to be careful when we say this, because it's like you don't have to tell like a person, you just go that cliff, even if you're afraid of doing it, right? Like, of course, we have to be very careful when we say this. But it's when you can do something, but you're still, when you have this excitement versus this fear, of doing something, your excitement is bigger, then you go for it.
Yeah.
And you don't let your fear stop you.
It's incredible that finding that balance, right? It's like learning how to drive a car with a stick shift or a manual, right? You find that balance or you're going to stall. So if the fear of failing overtakes the fear of succeeding, you're just going to stall and stop.
Yes, you're going to stop.
Because you don't think of
you don't believe in yourself.
Yeah.
And if you believe in yourself, you're more likely to take action, to seize the moment.
Yeah.
Even with more enthusiasm, right? Because we were saying before, you do it, but you are not so sure, and then just that you're just affecting the outcome.
Yeah. Your mind. So that the mind will play the trick. I can't do
Yes.
this, right? The mind I can't do this. And people, they literally back out of a wedding or, you see it in the movies, and that last minute decision to not go, like they overplay that one in terms of the wedding, particular man or woman, right? They're going to get married and they get back out the last minute. But I think it's the mind playing the tricks. Like, this isn't for me or whatever. I mean, it's extreme. It might be an extreme case, but there's probably examples you've come across all the time.
Yes.
Talk themselves out of it. The mind.
Right. The mind, right? That can be your best friend or your worst enemy. So let's tell me, there's several reasons why self-confidence can lead to success. And we are going to be speaking more in detail about those reasons in the next podcast, but let me just mention them. I'm just going to list them today. Well, what are the 3 reasons that there are more, but I'm just struck the 3 that I find the most important why self-confidence leads to success. It gives you the drive to start things. Confident people start things, right? They're not shy about launching a new idea, or even though when everybody around them is hesitating, they take action. If they are business owners, like most of our listeners, or entrepreneurs, they search for clients, they show up on social media, they promote their business, they go out and network, they look for net growth opportunities. They go all out. But you need to have self-confidence to be able to do it. What is a second reason why self-confidence leads to success? It gives you the ability to stand up for yourself, right? Allows you to stand up for yourself fairly and consistently. This is people will listen to you because you won't allow anybody to be treated unfairly.
This is incredible. Like, this seems almost obvious, but they're not. It's not. It seems like you're telling me this, and I'm like, yeah, it seems obvious, but it's not always obvious.
No, it's not obvious, and that's what I want to dig. As I said, we're gonna dig deeper a little bit in the next series. And this one, I'm just mentioning this. There's a lot of meat on here. There's a lot of flesh, then a lot of material.
There's a lot of meat on the bones. But what if? Wait, there's a lot of meat on the bones. But what if I'm vegetarian?
Well, there's a lot of portobello mushrooms here. So,
but isn't that great? Because that's something you said. I mean, it's off topic a little bit, but like the colloquial way that those expressions that we have, right? That it's like, okay, well, I'm a vegetarian, I'm a vegan, so there's the portobello mushroom.
There's the portobello mushrooms for portobello mushroom steaks to dig in here. So it also gives you the ability to say yes and the ability to say no. Right? Confident people have the ability to say no when appropriate. They don't assume unnecessary work or obligations. They don't people please just to get praise. Yeah,
no, I'm just saying, I always remember in a sales situation or a situation, if you're talking to the person who can easily say no, and they don't have the confidence, because either they're not in power, they don't have the power to say yes, or they just don't want to say, it's like, it just reminded me of that in a business situation where if you're not talking to the person who can say yes, and it depends, it's usually to do with a decision maker. You don't need to be talking to the person who says no, because they'll just say easily no. But this is different. I know this is different, but it reminds me in a business situation that, a lot of people, they can defer to no because it's easy, it's comfortable, right? It's easy to say no.
It's easy to say no, yes. Doesn't take you, right. So but also on your point, self-confidence also gives you the ability to say yes.
Yeah.
To say yes to opportunity. Confident people say yes to opportunity. New options are not lost just because they are shy or they don't believe in yourself, right?
Yeah.
you probably have seen, but we've been, I know saying third persons like me, I have been there in those situations in the past where I will let opportunity pass because I didn't believe I was worthy of those opportunities.
Sure. Do you have an example? So do you have an example that you could say, like if there's something you thought was an opportunity where you didn't have the confidence to say yes? Do you have an example? I mean, if you don't, that's fine. But if you,
Let me think of an example and give opportunity. Like, yeah, I remember when I was just fresh out of school, I was offered a job, and I thought, I don't know if I'm going to be able to be good at this job, and I hesitated too much, and somebody else took the job, right? And it's like, that's it, it's gone.
yeah.
And then it was just even more painful to see that the person who actually took the job was very successful like 5 years later, right? And pursuing the path that I wanted to pursue at that time, but I just hesitated too much.
It's so binary though, because it's binary because you have the opportunity to look, after 5 years, you look back, but your decision is either go that way or that way. You can't go back.
Right. And I know that I know now that my path was to be that way, so I could be in a position today of talking to you about this.
Yeah.
Right. But I want to share this with people so they know that there's a better and faster way. So so basically, simply put, confident people believe in their ability to succeed, right? So we also mentioned why even when you're an entrepreneur, it's even more important, and is one of the most important. I personally believe that is one of the most important qualities that you can possess as a business owner. It definitely gives you a competitive advantage.
So that's terrific, but to possess it, but I mean, what would be the tip to a business owner if they don't feel they possess this?
No, we're going to talk about this.
Yeah.
Just a part two. And again, here I'm just going to list them.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to make this episode super long that people have so much information.
Sure.
So let's just kind of break it down into different steps so we can just do one at a time and just make a more effective change, right? Because change is slow and it's baby steps.
Yeah.
So let me see. So what you're asking me here, how we can build self-confidence. No one is born with self-confidence. Rather, it's something that you learn through action, right? Before you can master something, you have to practice it.
Yeah.
So if you're afraid that if some of our listeners are afraid that lack of confidence, you just have this feeling that lack of confidence is holding them back from their success, it's just time to start flexing your confidence muscles. Let's do some exercises here. Let's just have some steps that will propel your business, not only your life, but also your business forward.
Yeah.
The first step that I will suggest to boost your self-confidence, and I said I'm going to go in detail more in the next episodes, monitor your internal dialogue. You should, I know this is a lot of people talked about this. That's what I really want to talk about it in detail.
Sure.
So we don't leave it in the surface, because in the surface can be just like, it's just easy to say, talk to yourself as you will do to someone that you love and respect. That's very easy to say, but then it's like, how do you do it?
Yes,
how do you start reprogramming your mind for success, right? How do you start reprogramming that self-talk that is going to have a huge impact in your self-worth?
So there's plenty of like, they'll talk about they overplay this in movies and where people listen to tapes and then they start that mantra, and there's a Seinfeld episode where George's father says serenity now, and serenity, and then he just at the end of it he just lost it. He lost it because it wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough to control that, the serenity now, and I just remember that. But
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I was just listening to another psychologist that was just mentioning that about these affirmations when you're doing it without doing any other work.
Yeah.
You don't believe that, right? Like, like, I am great, I am amazing, I can do this. And you don't really believe that you can do it, right? Like, so there's other work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just lying to yourself. And if you're lying to yourself, that just makes you feel worse.
But it's like that. Okay. Again, you brought me back to Saturday Night Live, Jack Handy. And so for anybody out there, he literally would just hold up a mirror. I'm good enough. I'm proud enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. And he literally, that was Jack Handy, positive affirmations, right? But I think you're right. It has to be more than that, because it's not going to get you through if there are those tough times for sure.
Right. So yeah. So there's ways to gain power and over your internal dialogue, right?
Yeah.
And as you know as an entrepreneur, that a positive attitude goes a long way in business. So does positive self-talk. So we're going to be talking about that in all our episodes. Good. So what is another thing? You have to get out of your comfort zone. If you want to boost your self-confidence, you have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to do hard things.
Literally,
right?
Google just, I have to say this, Google just predicted what I was going to write. I put must get out and it wrote your comfort zone. I'm sorry, that's Google Docs.
Right?
I'm on Google and it predicted.
Exactly. That means that people are Googling that, right? So it's like doing things that are tough fits your confidence. Yeah. If you do these things, you will start to develop the self-esteem, because that's self-esteem, that idea that you have about you, that sense that you have about you, is respect and admiration for yourself. And that will impact your self-confidence, right? In a positive way. Yeah. We're always looking for approval. Yeah, like, raise your hand if you're not looking for approval. We are all looking for approval. So why don't we start just by giving ourselves our own approval? And that is by doing hard things, right? So then the third thing to boost your self-confidence is to identify the qualities and skills that are more linked to your idea of success. Remember, we were talking about when you said like your idea, when you said what is right, and I said for you. Yeah. This is the same thing. You have to identify what is important for you, right? Because all the current research actually concludes that self-esteem is linked to your sense of competence. Yeah. Not anywhere, but in the areas that are important for you. Nice. So you will have your own definition of success, right? So we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that. Yeah. And that will be the third way of boosting your self-confidence, right? So because when you align with who you are, that gives you a sense of clarity and purpose. And with that sense of clarity and purpose is when you can focus on your goals, you can have more fun, you can have more passion, and you can have a greater success and more impact in the world. Well, you can make fun of those things. Like, I mean, I bring that up, but literally that's been, over time and I use that analogy to Saturday Night Live, or because they really emphasize a point where it's where on, in the Seinfeld episode where Serenity Now, obviously there's organizations and there's self-help groups, but that just embellishes it on the side. But I think these are important. And this is what keeps you motivated, right? This is what keeps you motivated in your business, because as we said in the beginning, this is a roller coaster. So what keeps you going is self-confidence and also your goals and the motivation that you have towards your goals. That is very linked to your self-confidence, because that is, if you have to believe that you can actually achieve those goals. Yeah. But I mean, goal setting is part of, for decades or for centuries was, goals in sports and goals in business and goals in, academics. They're everywhere. Goal to a baby to walk, like they literally, we set those, for a baby trying to walk, there's a goal. Okay, now they reach the, so it's perpetual. We have perpetual goals, right? Literally, it's. And I do work in work setting with my clients, but I find that I like to work from the inside out, right? I like my clients to find first confidence and alignment, and then go for goal setting. Because if you're not aligned with your purpose, if you're not aligned with who you are and what you want and with your soul, you're not gonna have the self-confidence to go for it, like really. So and we've all suffered of a lack of self-confidence in any moment at some point of our lives, right? So if we make self-confidence a place from a place of alignment in daily practice, I promise you will be better to identify your triggers and stop them when they come up. So are we concluding today then with a lesson? Do you have a tip or something? I mean, there's going to be a lot to unpack in future episodes. Yes, so I like this, but to build yeah. So let's start with walking the talk that self-confidence is like a muscle. So let's start with the next topic that we're going to be talking about next week. We said that we're going to be talking about what are the reasons that self-confidence leads to success? So the first one is gives you the drive to start things. So this will be my activity for you until we have our next episode. Think of at least one thing that you've been wanting to start and you haven't.
Okay. So I'm going to put
And then we're going to just unpack that on our next session, on our next episode.
So one thing that you wanted to start, but you haven't.
Yeah.
So that's not just for me. That's for the two listeners out there.
That's for the, for
number
all the
one and number two.
Yeah.
When you thing one, thing two, when you're listening.
Yes.
Dr. Seuss says thing one, thing two. You guys have to work together. You two need to work together. One thing you wanted to start that you didn't.
I will say three, but I think we can start with one because remember baby steps.
Keep it easy. Yes, baby steps.
Yes, just one thing that is really, like I know deep down that I really could be good at doing this, or I know deep down that if I have the courage, I will go for it. Like one thing that you have been putting off and you haven't done, but you really want to do.
Well, I think that's a good, Dr. V. Thanks for the coach today. You put me in the corner. I'm really on the spot here.
That's good.
We can use some platitudes here. I'm on the spot. You put me on. I remember one of my podcast guests. I'm going to leave this thought because it was the same. They were talking about, it was a F45 fitness, and he said, "Yeah, we have this 45-day challenge coming up." I'm like, "Oh, what's that?" Stupid me. The curiosity. Oh, what's that? Well, it's a 45-day fitness challenge. We have a day every day. And of course, we invite you, Alan, to come. And so that was during COVID, right? So I got to do it online, but I'll never forget that. Like they put me, like, oh, okay. So I did the 45-day challenge.
Well, you're in the corner today. So one thing that you've been wanting to do and you haven't done.
You put me on the corner. I don't know what that is, but I will definitely. I promise to return back when we to the coach's corner the next day.
Perfect.
It's not coach's corner, coaching corner. There is someone, a famous coach, Don Cherry, they used to call the coach's corner, and he got in trouble with CBC, but the coaching corner, it's fine. There's a lot of coaches in life, and this is
it's the coaching corner with Dr. V.
Dr. V, thank you so much for today, and I look forward to the next episode where we unpack more about self-confidence.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Dr. V. Have a good day. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.